When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions.
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories of the hour. Victims of Jeffrey Epstein criticised the US government after the release of heavily redacted case files, with some documents and images blacked out or missing. The Justice Department says more records will be released, but survivors say the disclosures offer little transparency or new information. 9 people are killed and 10 wounded when gunmen opened fire at a licensed tavern in Bacchusdal near Johannesburg. Police say multiple suspects fled the scene and a manhunt is underway as investigators work to determine the motive. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese announces a review of police and intelligence agencies after the Bondi Beach attack is declared a terrorist incident. 15 people are killed in the shooting at a Jewish festival, with police saying the gunmen were inspired by Islamic State. The Kremlin denies that three-way talks between Russia, Ukraine and the United States are being prepared, despite diplomatic meetings in Miami. President Vladimir Putin's aide says proposals from Ukraine and Europe do not improve the chances of reaching a long-term peace. The French presidency says it welcomes Russian President Vladimir Putin's readiness to speak with President Emmanuel Macron. Paris says the terms and format of any talks will be decided in the coming days. Ukrainian President Zelensky says Russia is trying to cut Ukraine off from the Black Sea after intensified strikes on ports and energy infrastructure. He says the attacks target Odessa and key trade routes as Moscow steps up drone and missile assaults. Israel's Security Cabinet approves the establishment of 19 new settlements in the occupied West Bank, according to an official statement. The decision brings the total number of settlements approved in the past 3 years to 69 and are seen as illegal under international law. The United States intercepts an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela in international waters, a move that comes just days after US President Donald Trump announced a blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers entering and leaving the country. We start this hour in the Middle East, and Israeli Defense Force Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir has warned that Israel will strike its enemies wherever required on near and distant fronts alike, signalling possible future action against Iran. He described Iran as central to what he called the longest and most complex war in Israel's history, accusing Tehran of financing and arming groups that threaten Israel. Zamir made the remarks during a handover ceremony for the head of the IDF Planning Directorate. The warning comes after the Iran-Israel war in June of 2025, where Israel carried out surprise strikes on Iranian nuclear and military sites, killing military leaders, scientists and politicians, while Iran retaliated with missiles and suicide drones targeting civilian and military locations. The conflict ended with a US-mediated ceasefire on the 24th of June this year. We're now joined by Professor Ephraim Imbar, a senior researcher at the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security, joining us live, of course, from Jerusalem. Thank you very much for joining us. How likely is it that Israel will once again launch something similar in regards to what we saw in June and strike Iran? Do you think the threat is still there, Professor Imbar?
Well, I think that the threat this time of the rearmament of Iran is not as important as it was in June, because now what we are lacking is a nuclear element. The rearmament of the Iranians is primarily in their missile force. They are able to produce a large number of missiles. There are estimates that they are able to produce 3,000 missiles, ballistic missiles yearly. I'm not sure that this is, at this time, a cause for an Israeli preemptive attack. If we see greater threats on part of Iran, of course, such a military strike on part of Israel is warranted.
And the IDF has described this as the longest and most complex war in Israel's history. If that is indeed the case, why is Israel still relying primarily on military force rather than a clear diplomatic strategy? We did of course see prior to that 12-day war, the Americans even trying to negotiate with the Iranians when it came to their nuclear program. Why does Israel continue to strike?
I think your question is very naive. I wish it would be able to solve our problems diplomatically. How can you reach a diplomatic agreement with Hamas that its covenant speaks about the destruction of Israel? How can we reach a diplomatic settlement with Iran that the Islamic Republic denounces an illegitimate state?
I'm talking about Iran in particular.
Hezbollah is similarly serious about trying to destroy the state of Israel. With such opponents, there is no diplomatic arena to deal with.
Professor Inbar, the Americans did negotiate with the Iranians. Of course, it ended up being to no avail. Of course, the uranium enrichment was a sticking point that couldn't quite get to. But however, they did meet and they did have diplomatic negotiations about Iran stopping its nuclear program. Why can't Israel do something similar along the lines? Not direct negotiations per se. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think the Iranians, first of all, don't want to sit with us in a room. And they say openly that they are not going to negotiate with Israel. They want its destruction. And of course, America is not threatened as Israel is. We have a case of what it's called politicide. They want to destroy the Jewish state. And they are not bashful about saying it. So I wish it would be a diplomatic possibility to solve the conflict. But with the character, political character of those regimes, there is no diplomacy. Diplomacy doesn't work.
Do you think the Israeli government, people surrounding it, Eyal Zamir, who we've just mentioned, was satisfied in how the 12-day war turned out? Of course, the Americans came in and bombed the 3 key nuclear sites. However, in regards to the destruction of all 3 sites, one can't tell what the damage is as of yet. Donald Trump, of course, continues to reiterate that they have been obliterated, although this is widely disputed. Is Israel currently content in the capabilities of Iran and that it doesn't currently show a threat to Israel in terms of its ability and its progression towards a nuclear weapon?
I think that Israel has a good reason to be pleased with the results of the 10 days war against Iran. Many doubted that Israel is able to conduct operations in Iran. We showed everybody that we can do it and we can do it successfully, as it was mentioned in the opening of the program. And moreover, I think that there is a reason to be satisfied because the Americans joined in a military campaign. The first time that Americans joined in an Israeli military campaign because they thought it was important to try to obliterate the Iranian nuclear program.
Okay, Professor Inbar, do stay with us as we have further updates coming for our viewers, however, this time coming out of the United States. where Republican Senator Lindsey Graham met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem, warning that Hamas is not disarming but actively rearming in Gaza. Graham said his impression is that Hamas is consolidating power rather than giving it up. He also expressed concern about Hezbollah in Lebanon, noting that the group is trying to make more weapons. Netanyahu agreed with Graham, calling the situation unacceptable. Graham emphasized that his visit to Israel has a purpose: to make 2026 the year of peace and knocking out the bad guy. Those are words from Graham. The meetings come ahead of Netanyahu's upcoming trip to Florida, where he will meet US President Donald Trump to discuss the fragile ceasefires in Gaza and Lebanon. Professor Imbar, what is your point of view when it comes to the current state of what is going on inside the Gaza Strip? Of course, we get conflicting reports pretty consistently that violence, internal violence, is pretty rife at the moment, infighting between Hamas and other gangs inside the Gaza Strip amongst the rubble. Lindsey Graham there saying that Hamas is rearming, of course, striking some fear into of course, Israelis. Those can't be very nice words to hear. What are your thoughts?
I think that Senator Graham is very correct in his assessment, which corresponds to the Israeli assessment as well. Hamas has no intention to disarm. The Americans relied on Turkey and Qatar to convince Hamas to disarm, but I think they do not deliver. And Hamas continues to rule parts of Gaza by force, cruelly, executing people that they don't like. And unfortunately, only the IDF can disarm Hamas. I don't see any other candidates to do it successfully.
Professor Imbar, what do you say to critics who say that Israel doesn't provide acceptable evidence as it continues to strike both infrastructure in Lebanon and, of course, Gaza, both after which have ceasefires in place?
I'm not sure it would be smart on Israeli part to share intelligence with newsmen, with journalists. We have to convince Americans that our actions are legitimate, and as long as Americans do not raise their brows and are agreeing with us, I think we are okay. Hamas continues to try to oppose Israel, to exterminate Israel, and so is Hezbollah. Those organizations have no reason to live. They have to be obliterated.
Professor Ephraim Imbar, thank you very much for joining us and taking the time and speaking to us. Pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move over to the United Kingdom, and a man has been arrested on suspicion of murder following a stabbing in Birmingham. The victim was tragically pronounced dead at the scene on Swanage Road shortly after 6:40 p.m. local time on Saturday, despite efforts by emergency services to save him. A 28-year-old suspect remains in custody as a cordon has been established and urgent inquiries are being carried out to determine the exact circumstances of the attack. Officers have appealed for anyone with information to contact West Midlands Police or Crime Stoppers anonymously. The investigation is in its early stages and the area remains under close police supervision while detectives gather evidence and witness statements. We're now joined by Martin Saar-Arias, an international affairs expert, joining us live from Ecuador. Of course, although violence in the United Kingdom, violent crime in the United Kingdom is on a decline, the knife problem is undoubtedly still rife, especially in these huge metropolitan cities. Of course, another unfortunate instance of a man losing his life in the West Midland city of Birmingham. What does this say about the current state of crime in the United Kingdom right now?
So right now the investigations are involving a 28-year-old British citizen. We're not really sure what are the motives behind this horrible attack. I think the situation of terror attacks or hate attacks in the United Kingdom is not really usual. Unfortunately, this leads to a feeling that the UK needs to resolve some problems within its society. It can be a hate crime, it can be a regular crime. The police is investigating. Right now, we don't have any special result, but the suspect is on the police hands right now.
Yes, do stay with us, Martin, as we have further news coming our way, but viewers' way, but this time out of the United States. And Alphabet's Google and Apple have advised their employees on US work visas to avoid international travel due to delays of up to 12 months for visa stamping appointments at embassies. The immigration law firms representing both the companies have said that the delays stem from new social media screening requirements, warning that staff risk being stranded outside the United States if appointments are postponed. Now, according to Google's memo, the adversary supplies to holders of H-1B, H-4, F, J and M visas as US embassies and consulates face appointment delays of up to a year. Meanwhile, the US President Donald Trump's administration this month have also announced that there is an increased vetting of applicants for H-1B visas for highly skilled workers, including screening social media accounts. However, the H-1B visa program is widely used by the technology sector to hire skilled workers from India and China, which has been under the spotlight after the Trump administration imposed a $100,000 fee for new applicants this year. Martin joins us once again. Martin, what can you tell us about this and Donald Trump's flip-flapping when it comes to this policy?
This policy just harms the U.S. market. This comes from a nationalistic and even racial perspective of saving the so-called American society or the American culture, but in the back of harming the high-tech sector in the United States by avoiding highly skilled and very intelligent professionals from the Southeast of Asia and in general other parts of the world. I think this will actually harm the U.S. market, and it also comes from the budget crisis of the Senate organization. Right now, the U.S. has a very complicated time appointing visa meetings with the applicants because they are lacking of the budget that they need. So this, I think, the solution of Google is very intelligent and smart. They don't want to be responsible of any employer delay in their life or being stuck in a country that they're not supposed to be. I think this is a responsible answer to this unlogical policy, in my opinion.
Yes, Martin Saar Arias, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you for taking the time. We now move on over for the developing situation in Australia, and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese faced jeers and boos as he arrived at an evening memorial at Sydney's Bondi Beach, honouring victims of the recent gun attack at a Hanukkah celebration. The nation observed a day of reflection to remember the 15 people killed and dozens wounded in the attack, with security tightened and flags at half-mast on government buildings. A minute of silence was held at the time of the shooting and when it began. The attack exposed gaps in gun licence assessments and information sharing between agencies, prompting Albanese to announce a nationwide gun buyback. Gun safety experts say Australia's strict gun laws still have loopholes. Albanese, facing pressure from critics over the government's response to rising anti-Semitism linked to the war in Gaza, has vowed to strengthen hate laws following the tragic incident. And we finish this hour with some news from the tech world. And OpenAI chief executive Sam Altman has suggested that the next major leap in artificial intelligence will not come from sharper reasoning abilities, but from something far more fundamental: memory. Altman has outlined a future in which AI systems are able to retain and learn from vast amounts of personal data across an individual's lifetime, fundamentally reshaping the idea of a digital personal assistant. According to Altman, the current AI systems excel at reasoning tasks, but still lack reliable long-term memory, while humans continue to be the most effective personal assistants due to their grasp of context and nuance, even though they often struggle to consistently retain details. Meanwhile, Altman has said that the real opportunity lies in building systems that can remember everything a user has shared over time, from conversations and emails to documents and preferences. He added that such persistent memory could allow AI to identify patterns and needs that people themselves may never consciously articulate. However, Altman has indicated that OpenAI is actively working towards the vision, suggesting that more advanced memory-driven personal assistants could begin to emerge as early as 2026. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international updates.